Herb Baumeister was the kind of man people trusted, a wealthy businessman, a husband, a father, the owner of a grand Indiana estate called Fox Hollow Farm. On the surface, he was successful, charming in a stiff sort of way, and deeply involved in his community. But underneath that mask of suburban perfection, Herb was quietly building one of the most horrifying double lives in American history. By day, he ran a thrift store chain called Save-A-Lot, known for his obsessive work ethic and odd personality. By night, he prowled the Indianapolis gay bar scene, introducing himself to men he'd later lure back to his mansion, a sprawling property surrounded by dense woods and isolation. What those men didn't know was that Fox Hollow Farm would become their final resting place. Baumeister's murders were methodical, personal, and disturbingly intimate. He strangled his victims during sexual encounters, often filming or photographing them, and then disposed of their bodies on his own land. His family, living upstairs, claimed to have no idea what was happening just beneath their feet, even when the house began to smell strange and their son found what looked like a human bone in the backyard. Over the years, rumours swirled in the Indianapolis gay community about a man who picked people up and they never came back, but police had no suspect, no name, and no clue that the killer was one of the city's most prominent citizens. It wasn't until 1994, when a man named Tony Harris came forward after narrowly escaping Herb's grasp, that investigators finally began to connect the dots. Around the same time, police were investigating a string of disappearances connected to I-70, the so-called I-70 Strangler, and soon the evidence pointed straight to Baumeister. When officers arrived at Fox Hollow Farm to question him, Herb refused to let them search his property. But when his wife, Julie, later gave them permission, what they found defied belief. Scattered across the woods were thousands of charred bone fragments, the remains of at least 11 men, possibly more. Detectives found bones in fire pits, in gravel, even in the soil near the pool house. It was as if the entire estate had been built on top of death. When the investigation closed in, Herb fled the country, driving to Ontario, Canada, where he took his own life in 1996. He left behind a single suicide note claiming he was struggling with finances and personal problems, not a single mention of the victims whose remains were still being uncovered back home. Even after his death, strange things continued to happen at Fox Hollow Farm. The new owners reported ghostly voices, footsteps in empty halls, and the feeling of being watched. Visitors claimed to see shadows moving across the property, as if the men Baumeister killed were still there, trapped forever on the grounds where they'd lost their lives. The story of Herb Baumeister is one of the most disturbing reminders of how evil can thrive in plain sight, not in some distant forest or grimy motel, but in a beautiful mansion behind manicured lawns with family photos on the wall and laughter echoing upstairs. A killer hiding behind the mask of success, a businessman who buried horror in his own backyard. Fox Hollow Farm stands today as both a luxury home and a graveyard, a monument to deception, privilege, and the darkness that can hide behind the most respectable face in the neighbourhood.